Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed as an entrepreneur. What's up, Successful Dropouts? Get stoked because today on the show we have Holly Cardew. Holly is the founder of Pixie.com, which helps e-commerce stores optimize their product images to ultimately increase their online sales and allow the store owners to focus more on running their business. Holly has a background in e-commerce, online marketing, graphic design, and outsourcing. She's worked with businesses in Australia and internationally to build their online presence through online marketing. In 2014 and 2015, she was named one of Australia's top 50 entrepreneurs under 40, and in 2016 was listed as a Forbes 30 under 30 Asia emerging entrepreneur to watch in the e-commerce and retail space. So Holly, that's the intro I have for you, but tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, sure. Thank you first for having me on the show.
Absolutely.
Or your podcast. I am the founder and CEO, so I joke it's Chief Everything Officer of Pixie. And at Pixie, which is kind of what you touched on, is that we optimize product listings through API integrations with different e-commerce platforms.
And so how long ago did you start that business?
So I put up a landing page about 3 years ago, just testing it out to see if there was any interest, and then there was. And at the time, I had another online company, but I've only really been working on Pixie full time for the past 2 years.
And I was just doing a little bit of research online. Are you looking for funding? It seems like it was more of a bootstrap business. Is it still that way, or are you looking for additional funding now?
Yeah, we are definitely, I would consider us a bootstrap business. We've raised less than $150,000. I guess in Australia, we're really taught to build a real business. So from the beginning, from the get-go, we're always looking for ways in which we can create revenue. And I think it's definitely possible that for us to go raise money. It's just, do we want to take money or do we want to keep growing how we're growing? And I can keep most of the company.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's and so have you had to come to that kind of crossroads yet where you've had to decide, absolutely, are you going to keep trying to grow as you have been or get more funding, or is that still a little ways down the road before you have to make that decision?
It's still a little bit of the way down the road. I think the thing is, at the end of the day, we can still build how we want to build and grow, or do we want to create a rocket ship but give away part of the company? And also, it's not just giving away part of the company at the shares. It's actually giving away, authority. You will have a board. They will make decisions for you. You have to do things that they wanted, like the way they done. So I think it's not actually about, I'm not so concerned about giving away shares and having investment. What I am concerned about is I am building the company the way I would like to build it, and I don't necessarily want someone to come in, because as an entrepreneur, you're building a company so you can be your own boss. And essentially, once you have investors, they are your boss.
Yeah, that's a great point. So right now the company's, it's kind of young, things are still, exciting, you're growing, and you just want to be 100% in charge of that still. I mean, it's your baby, right?
It is my baby, but I think it's important not to be attached to your business in a way that at the end of the day, like, business is business, and your business is not you. Even though you pour your heart and soul into it, you need to understand that sometimes there's decisions that need to be made. And, I think a lot of people get caught up on their idea or their business, especially when it's not doing well, and they don't realize when should they pivot or move on.
Ah, I see. So you have one of the coolest accents I think we've had on the show so far. I'm sure you get told that a few times, but so you are from Australia. Give us a little bit of background on you.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Sydney, Australia. I'm very international. As soon as I finished high school, I moved to Paris, and then I moved to London, and then I moved back to Australia, and now I'm currently between Sydney and San Francisco. I went to university for first year in Paris, and then I ended up dropping out, or not dropping out. I just decided not to continue studying.
Right.
But yeah, I did grow up in Sydney, Australia, so I would consider myself Australian.
And are you going to live there permanently one day? Or are you going to move back, or are you in the States for good?
Oh, as I mentioned, I love living overseas, like being international. I also have a British passport, so I can live in Europe, which is good. I think Australia is a fantastic country for family. We have very good health benefits. We're very fortunate. We don't realize, especially until like I come to America and see some of the problems here. But at the moment, like I want to be where the smartest people are for the industry that I'm in. And I believe that the smartest people in technology are in San Francisco. I've heard, Israel, which I have been to, but only for a week, and Berlin are great places too. So I consider going there. But at the moment, San Francisco is like a hub for tech companies. And
how are you liking it there so far?
Love it. It's definitely a place that grows on you. Like at the beginning, you don't really know what it is. It is a bit of a bubble, but I'm very aware that I am in this bubble. You can get cookies delivered to your door within 20 minutes, which is pretty crazy. But I think the people are fantastic. Everyone's really supportive. Everybody always wants to help you grow. Even if you're a competitor, people still want to help you because at the end of the day, everybody's solving a problem. And if we all help each other, it will come around.
Now, I read somewhere online that you are quite the coffee connoisseur. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a coffee connoisseur, but Australians are very into their coffee, and I do need my one good coffee a day. And Australians do not call black water coffee, which I've only started to like this week after 2 years. I need my one good cappuccino a day. And I would say in San Francisco, my favorite coffee is 4 Barrel.
There you go. Oh, man. So, Holly, here at Successful Dropout, we help young college-age students go from leaving school early to becoming successful entrepreneurs. And the first step there is that scary decision on whether or not to leave school. So tell us the story of how and why you decided to drop out in Paris, was it you said?
Yes. So when I finished high school, so year 12, I was 18, I just missed a spot to receive a scholarship to a university in Australia. So I decided to go to Paris. Australians love taking a gap year, so a year off where they travel. I didn't want to travel. I wanted to stay in an apartment in one place. So I became a nanny for a French family in Paris, and they wanted me to stay for 18 months. And I said, in return, that's absolutely fine, but I'd like to do first year university. I studied visual communication in French, which was really interesting.
Oh, wow.
So which, I didn't know French. So it was actually double learning.
So you had to almost learn another language in order to learn about your subject?
Yeah, exactly. So I was writing art essays in French, which was interesting. I did get into second year, and I thought it would be a good opportunity. Ironically, I didn't want to be a graphic designer sitting behind a computer all day, which now I sit behind a computer all day.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I'm very independent, and I didn't want my parents paying for my schooling over in France. And I decided it would be very difficult to study and work at the same time. But at the same time, I was always entrepreneurial. I opened my eBay account when I was 14 years old. So it was natural for me to not continue. I went to a very good high school in Australia, so I think education was important to my parents. My mother studied law. She did freak out when I decided to stop university, and for a while she just kept bugging me what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Right, yeah. So that leads me kind of to my next question, which is how did your friends and family react to you dropping out of university?
I think that friends didn't say anything. Friends never say anything. They especially women, they probably just talk behind your back. But at the same time, I don't really mind. Who cares what other people think? I think the thing is, at the end of the day, it's your own journey. And entrepreneurs in particular know, I wouldn't say we're always right, but we know what we're doing and why we're doing it. My mum did worry, but I just kept doing what I needed to do. I lived out of home. I never asked them for money. So at the end of the day, I was my own independent person. She couldn't really have a say in what I did. But I did end up getting a very, very good job in London for the Australian Chamber of Commerce. So I think she was quite impressed until I left that too.
So you dropped out and she was kind of worried, and then you got a good job and she was okay, and then left that job and she was worried again.
Yeah. It's only till recently that she's like, understands that I will be doing my own thing and I am good at doing my own thing.
What does she think now?
Well, she thinks it's amazing because one of my investors is Australia's largest telecommunications company called Telstra. So it's a bit like Verizon or AT&T investing in your company.
Oh, wow.
It was through their accelerator program, Rudy, but I think she can relate to what AT&T or Verizon, the equivalent Telstra, is, so she loves it because it's like validation from a corporate.
Right. Well, what advice would you give any of our listeners on how best approach this with friends or family if they're not really feeling the support there?
I mean, I think the thing is you just have to be very confident or secure with your own thinking and just remind them, especially when you're young, that like this is the time that you can like make mistakes. This like definitely. Actually, Gary Vaynerchuk released a video that went pretty much viral on this topic about how college students should make mistakes. Like your 20s, well, like at least till you're, 28, make as many mistakes as you want.
Yep.
Like that's the learning time. And then when you're in your 30s, become really good at something, and then your 40s, like you're the best at that one thing.
Yeah, I remember watching that video too, and it was really, really good. In fact, I'll put the link to that in the show notes for this episode. But yeah, I remember him saying, you're going to school, you're young, and it's easy to freak out and think, oh, I got to choose a path now. I got to figure out what I want now because this will determine the course for the rest of my life, which is true. It will determine that the course for the rest of your life. That's why you should, if you're not 100% sure about what you're doing, don't be afraid to get out there and explore. And, you're so young. I mean, you can go to school from, 18 to 19 and then take, 20 to 21 off and go back when you're 22 and finish a degree if you decide that that's what you want to do.
But the other thing is I've had one corporate job in London and they never, it was never a question, do you have a degree? I just had a range of skills, like base skills that they needed to hire for. And I got the job and I learned way more than like my friends did. And I got back to Australia and they were still in their third year of university and still didn't know. Like I have friends who have, 2-3 degrees, psychology, fashion, like all this mixture of random stuff, and they don't use it.
Yeah, especially when you have more of an artistic degree like that. And what you were talking about where they didn't even look for your degree, there's more of I find that employers now are looking more at something called a value proposition more than they do a resume. And even some of the bigger companies like Google, for example, they're doing this, where they will take a look more at what your actual skills are and what value you can bring them once you're hired, instead of, what you studied or where you got your degree. And so this has led some students, I know we've had a couple of guests on the show beforehand who got really good jobs straight out of, one of them I think straight out of high school, because instead of creating a resume, which he sent in to this company, he created a marketing plan for like a 6-month marketing plan for this company and said, this is what I can do for your marketing if you hire me. And that's a value proposition. And because of that, he got hired.
Yeah. I mean, I think I do feel sorry for, Americans, because I've realized coming here, everybody asks, what school did you go to? And in Australia, that doesn't happen. You go to university, and yes, there's some good universities, but no one says, like, which school or college or university did you go to? And I think there's a lot of pressure on not just, like, if you get a degree, great, you've got a degree. But if it's not from one of the top schools, it's nearly just as, like, I don't want to stress this, but it's nearly as bad as, like, worse than dropping out. They're like, do you either go to Harvard, Stanford, or do you drop out? Which I think is terrible, but I've noticed that in the culture here. Like, I've heard people who hire all the time and they're just like, oh, they didn't go to this school. But then if you didn't go to school, they have no idea where to place you. So it's like a different acceptance level.
Yeah, it's so ingrained here, I know. That's really interesting to get a perspective from the outside like that.
It's a shame.
Well, do you remember having any fears when you dropped out? And, if you did, how did you manage or overcome those?
No, I didn't have any fears. At the end of the day, you can always go back. It's like people saying to me, oh, do you have a fear of moving to Paris? Or do you have a fear of moving to San Francisco? No, I can just stop renting my apartment and get on a plane and go back. It's the same as like dropping out. I know in Australia, I don't know about here, but you can defer your university. So you can defer your degree for a year. And I think you may be able to even extend that. So you can go away for a year and then you can come back and you'll still hold your place. So I wouldn't be fearful. I would just understand that you can go back. My mom studied law at the age of 30 while she was pregnant. So I don't think that like age doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I know there is something like that here with most colleges where if you leave, it's not necessarily dropping out. You're basically just kind of taking a leave of absence for,
yes.
And I think some colleges are different, but I think a year is pretty typical, and you can still come back and keep going right where you left off. So
yep.
Yeah, that can eliminate a lot of fear when you think that's just have that kind of as a backup plan.
Mm-hmm.
Great point. A lot of the times when people drop out, they're most nervous for those first few months, maybe first 6 months after they drop out. I know I was, because that's crucial. You're in the real world now. You've got to make something happen, especially if you're an entrepreneur, if you're starting your own business. And those first few months are just so crucial. So I'd love for you to tell us about, after you dropped out, what the first few months looked like. I know you mentioned you might have gotten a couple, like a job or two somewhere.
Well, I was in Paris and then I decided not to continue. So I went back to Australia just for 6 months. When I got back to Australia, I realized that everybody was the same. No one had really changed. And I was a bit worried. So I planned to go to London, but in the 6 months saving up to go back to London, because I wanted to be able to, I've always supported myself. So it was important that I could continue doing that. I had 3 jobs. I worked.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I worked in a shoe store, I worked in a clothing store, and I worked I was one of the first 5 employees at Australia's largest white goods online store called appliancesonline.com.au. And ironically, I was actually responsible for uploading all the products, which I totally forgot about until recently. But I was, working with all the product images and all the product catalog to upload it. I think when you first drop out, you do need it. If you haven't had any experience, I think it is important to get some experience. I've had one corporate job, and it was with the Australian Chamber of Commerce was a very small company. We had a board, but there was only 5 people in the office. So I've never really had the experience of like a manager. So now I go to mentors and advisors to get some, more knowledge on how to be a really good leader, especially a female leader in tech. But I think if you don't know what you want to do, but university isn't for you and you do drop out, then I think it would be good to get a job where you can learn hands-on, like as much as possible, while somebody else is essentially paying you and paying for all your mistakes.
Right, and it sounds like that's what you did with this company where you were one of the first 5 employees. It sounds like you were doing a lot of kind of what you're doing now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean,
or at least working in the same industry.
It was e-commerce, definitely,
right, okay.
And like even just working in a shoe store or clothing store when you're 20, which I think, well, at the time I think I was 19. It's just such good experience because especially if you're working in a company or business where they allow you to bring ideas. So I was constantly customers would come in and I'd think about how can we write them an email newsletter, or how can we provide them with some blogs with this was 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. So blogs didn't really exist, but I was always thinking about what else could we do for our customers. And then if you have a boss that allows you to do stuff, it's amazing because then you can take ideas and run with them.
During those first 6 months when you had those jobs, were you at all thinking that you would start your own business at some point? Was that in your mind at all?
Yeah, for me it's natural. So when I was 18, I started a travel website. And then when I was 21, I did do an e-card website, and I did open my eBay account when I was 14. So right. It wasn't necessarily, let's start my own business. I was always just essentially trying to do things or make money on the side.
Right.
Doing anything good.
Had it in your blood.
Yep.
So yeah, so I just want to pull out, the important things there that you did, and which is pretty common. I find when I ask this question a lot is you basically left after you dropped out, and you just sounds like you worked your butt off, saved up a lot of money, and then that kind of built the foundation as far as financially and experience wise to then kind of start doing a little bit more on your own.
Yes.
And so right now I'd love to transition more to talk about your entrepreneurship journey. So you kind of gave us an overview of Pixie, but I'd love you to give us more of what's the history behind starting that business? I mean, it really is a fascinating business for me anyways. I love e-commerce, online business, and tell us a little bit more about how you got that idea and how that came about.
Sure. So when I moved from London, I actually moved to regional Australia, to a town with the first town I lived in was 10,000 people, and the other town had 40,000 people. So I was between both of them. And at the time I moved there because of my partner. And I realized that all these businesses didn't have an online presence. So I basically had to create my own job because I was in the country and there was nothing else to do. So I was selling stuff online through eBay, which was quite successful. But then I realized a lot of the stores around me that were very successful in terms of in-store revenue didn't have any online presence. So I started building an online marketplace at the time, and I also built online stores for these local businesses. But their biggest problem was their content. So I built a landing page, and essentially another store in another state in Australia submitted 800 photos in our third week. And I realized it was a bigger problem. So then that's when I continued with Pixie.
So you originally you were just working with other businesses to develop their online presence and just take their physical products they were selling in store and put them online, and then you saw a need there for basically better images, correct?
Yes. Yeah, better content, and make it easier for smaller businesses to create the content and get stuff online. Because there's a lot of businesses out there that are spending, thousands and thousands, $20,000 for a basic website. And I thought that was crazy for a small business. You can, with e-commerce platforms such as Shopify, you can get an e-commerce site up within 2 days. It shouldn't cost $20,000. But I actually started, instead of building their online store first, a lot of them, this was, 5-6 years ago, they didn't have any Facebook presence or Instagram presence, and they didn't know how to use it either. So I would build out their social following, grow their business, their in-store business, by getting the social following to grow. The customers who were looking at social media would run in-store, and then I used that following to build the online store and generate more revenue.
And so really Pixie came out of you just discovered a need in the marketplace and came up with a solution.
Yes.
I'd love to dig a little bit more into that, because I think a big question that a lot of people have is, how do I come up with great business ideas? And there's, on one hand, it's tempting to think, okay, I just need to lock myself in a room with a notepad and just jot down all these ideas. But then on the other side of the fence, there's the thought that if you just get busy doing stuff, if you just start doing things, maybe even if it's just getting a job working somewhere else, that being active, a lot of the times you'll just kind of stumble upon a need that needs to happen. Do you have anything to kind of speak to that?
Definitely. So a couple of things is, number one, everyone who's listening is probably at least 10 years younger than me. So you guys have a really good skill set that a lot of, for example, businesses don't. I'm new-ish to Snapchat, but you have probably been using it for the past 2 years or longer. And so and my advantage at the time was that I knew Instagram, I knew Facebook, but these store owners who were, in their 30s, 40s, 50s didn't know it. So I would go in there selling my service that I can run your Facebook. And even if somebody came to me today and was like, I can run your Snapchat or another social platform that I probably never heard of, I would let them do that because you probably have more experience. The other thing is, I think it is really important to go get a job and be busy. I've never sat down and written down ideas. I mean, occasionally I do, but your ideas come from problems that you see. I think if you can join a company in an industry or market that you're really interested in, you will learn so much about the problem. The one issue that I do have now is that I used to work in e-commerce. I don't anymore. So the biggest problem is that I now have to go speak to customers and users about what are the problems that you're facing in your business. Whereas I was part of, like, in the problem. I really understood the problems. I knew, for these past 2 years, I know exactly what to build. Now we're hitting like the next stage of the business where it's like, I need to go back and involve myself in the e-commerce business. And investors tend to like it when you are the industry expert. So if you can join a market or industry that you're interested in, learn as much about every bit of it and every problem that everyone has, then you'll find that you don't even have to sit down and write ideas. You'll just come across it and you'll be like, yeah, that is a massive problem and I know these people have it. And then you already have a customer that you can sell to.
That is such a good word. I love those points you made there where your best ideas come from problems that you encounter. And the only way that you're going to encounter those problems is if you just really dive into a particular business or industry that you're really interested in, get involved and start taking action. And I totally agree with that, Holly. Myself, I've tried the sit down and come up with some cool business ideas thing, a while back, and it just doesn't work. But as soon as I started getting busy and just taking action on something that I was interested in, man, you just start, every day. Like I'll have 3 new ideas and I just jot them down, and it's in the course of actually doing things. And then I encounter problems and I come up with a solution to it. And 9 times out of 10, that solution would make a decent business or a little side hustle. So,
yeah, I mean, I think if you think about every product, okay, there are exceptions to the rule where, nobody said, oh, I need an iPhone. They came up with an iPhone and it was like a cool thing. But that rarely happens. Whereas if you think about Instagram, they would have, Kevin, the founder, he probably would have said, oh, I think it was his girlfriend or someone wanted to edit photos and put filters to make them look pretty.
Yep.
There's Instagram. And then, you look at Snapchat, going back to Snapchat. It's like somebody sat down and was like, oh, I don't want my photos being stored. I'm going to send a text message like I want it to disappear. And then that would have happened. So I think it's really, it's a problem.
How do you generate revenue right now with Pixie?
So at the moment we charge for credit packages. The business pre-purchases those credit packages, and then it's on average about $2 an image.
And so again, I don't know if we've talked about this yet during the course of the interview, but specifically what you're doing with these images, from what I can see, is you're editing out. The customer takes a picture, correct? Or actually, you can explain this a lot better. What specifically do you do to these images? What's the service specifically?
Yeah, sure. So when you're selling online, there's 2 things. Number one, if you're selling on a platform such as Amazon, Google Shopping, Yahoo Shopping, or Houzz,
right,
they have image requirements that you have to meet as a seller. The other thing is that if you have your products on a white background, it will increase your conversion rate, so increase your sales. So what we do is we have API or app integration connections with these e-commerce platforms. You will upload your photos that you've taken, and we will edit and remove the background and crop and resize all the photos and make them uniform across every platform that you're selling on. So if you have a Shopify store, for example, you may need all your photos in square because that's the website template that you have. So we do that within 24 hours for the e-commerce businesses.
And you outsource that work?
So it's part algorithm and part human, and we are essentially a bit like an Uber model where we have people on demand.
I see. What do you think I'd be interested to hear your take on the psychology behind why just having a white background on a product image boosts sales. Why do you think that is?
Definitely less distraction. Like it just removes the distraction. You can see clearly, like it's nothing worse. I mean, it's interesting. There's even large stores that do it. They have poor product photography.
Yeah, I know. Right now I'm looking into the fulfillment by Amazon route and doing some private labeling. And one of the things you can look at is other people's listing for a particular product that you're thinking of selling yourself. So your competitors, right? And that's one of the things that I can look at is how is their image quality. And it's pretty crazy how many of these private sellers have just really crappy backgrounds. You know, they just kind of set the product on their home desk or something and snapped a picture with and it's overexposed and all this stuff. And
Yeah, and the other thing is people don't think about it's not just conversion rate. It's actually, if you have better product photos, you'll have less returns because there's nothing worse than getting a product and you find that it looks nothing like the photo. And then what if you send it back and then you have the store has to refund you. So therefore they've just totally lost us out. Plus they've lost on the shipping.
So Holly, everybody has an entrepreneurial journey. Every entrepreneur does. And it has its ups and downs. And so if you can remember, I'd love to hear the story of what you would consider your worst entrepreneurial moment.
Hiring the wrong people. I mean, it's not the worst moment. It's just a learning thing, to be honest. Like as a new CEO, you're learning how to be a good leader. And when you hire the wrong people, it's costly, but then having to fire someone is the worst because you have this dream and hopes that everything's going to be amazing and it's not.
Do you have a specific story about a time when that happened?
Yes. And I'm more than happy to share a link to a full article that I wrote about it. When you start a tech company, everybody would tell you that you need a CTO. You need a technical co-founder. I would like to be an angel investor, and I do believe that I would invest in teams with a technical person. At the same time, I do really believe in people who don't have a technical background and who are very switched on, who are able to get things done, can actually go hire a technical person. Whether they're a CTO, they don't need to be a co-founder. It does help, but they don't need to be. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get into this accelerator program in Australia, and I needed a technical co-founder.
And so again, to explain to our listeners, an accelerator program is basically a program that accelerates your startup?
Yes. Well, essentially, they will invest part in accelerate your startup. I mean, they give you a bit of capital and they give you mentoring. At the end of the day, you still have to work like as hard as you would anywhere else. They don't help necessarily. It's a support infrastructure.
Right. And so you needed a partner to qualify.
Yeah, I mean, investors are always looking for tech companies, always looking for a technical co-founder and a business person. If you don't have any traction, I think now later on it's a bit different because they see that you've done all this stuff by yourself or with the team that you've hired, and so they believe in you more. But in the early days, they definitely want you to have a technical person.
Yeah. Okay, so you were looking for this technical co-founder, and what happened?
Yeah, I had this technical co-founder, and although he's a good developer, he hadn't managed people before. And so one of the big learning lessons is that just because you need a CTO, they may not, which is a chief technology officer, mm-hmm. They may not be the right person to lead and manage multiple developers. Now, at an early stage company, you don't have multiple developers to manage. So I would suggest having a lead engineer who can be promoted, but you can't demote people. It doesn't work. They'll never feel the same way.
Yeah, right.
So I think starting out with, a lead engineer or, instead of a COO, so chief operations officer, start with an operations manager or an operations person in your team, and you can promote them later on.
And so how did that work out for you? Did you end up finding somebody, or what was the story there?
Well, I ended up firing the person.
Oh, okay.
We realized that it wasn't going to work, which is okay. I mean, these things don't work necessarily. That's the other, just jumping back, that's actually a really good reason why it's good to get a job. I didn't have the network from university because I did first year in Paris. And then I didn't really have the network from a corporate for team members because I was, essentially I was just in a team with 5 people. Whereas if you go get a job, you will have all the people you want to hire right off the bat. I didn't have that. So I was essentially just grabbing people, like I would look online, but I didn't have the people who I'd worked really closely with on problems before.
Right. So what specifically do you think you learned from that experience then?
You don't need a CTO straight away. You don't need to have high-level people in such a small team.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to move on to what a light bulb moment or an aha moment of your entrepreneurial experience. Maybe something that just really clicked and kind of changed the way you approached your business, a positive experience. Is there a story you can tell us about that?
I mean, there's a few, but I think the one main thing that's still but I'm still figuring out is everybody always said to me, always be hiring. And this goes back to what I was just mentioning, is that I didn't understand what they meant. I was like, I don't have enough money. How can I hire? Like, who am I going to hire? What do you mean? And it's only until now what they actually mean is like constantly network, constantly write a list of like, if you had $2 million in the bank and you could hire the next 10 like people for your team, who would they be? Like, think really big. And, you know, are they currently at Google? Are they currently at Amazon? Wherever they are, write down their name and how much it will cost to hire them. Because when you go to those investors, or when you do have enough money in the bank, you don't want to spend the next 3 months trying to find that person. When you're a fast-growing company, you need them now. So it's really important to have that list of people, and then you can, you can just grab them as soon as you need them. I think one of the most amazing things that I've done just this year is I hired a product manager, and it has been invaluable to our team. We've executed on so much more. So actually, sometimes things look costly at the beginning, and you don't want to spend the money because you prefer to put it to growth, but actually you end up generating more revenue, and you find new ways to make more money to cover those costs.
So just kind of starting to get the right people on the team earlier than you might think you need them.
Yes, and also be willing to let things go. I want to build the product, I want it to be this way and that way, but at the end of the day, I now have 16 people, you can't handhold and do absolutely everything. You have to hire the right people who are going to execute your vision and give them the responsibility to do it.
Holly, if you could time travel back to day one of your entrepreneurial journey and have 10 minutes with your former self to communicate any lessons you've acquired with the intentions of saving yourself mistakes and heartache, what would you tell yourself?
I would have to say, just be bold and don't worry too much about what people think, and take more risk. I'm still learning to take more risk.
Are you not a huge risk taker?
I am, but I'm always making sure that I have enough money in the bank. And I think that comes down to myself when I was young. I from the day in Australia, you're legally allowed to work when you're 14 and 9 months. On the day I turned 14, 9 months, I went to McDonald's and got a job. So it's I think I am a risk taker. Like, I'm very comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Right.
But I do think I could take even more risk. Because at the end of the day, as I said, you can go back. I could call up my parents and live with my parents, or I could just go get a job.
What's a personal habit that contributes to your success?
Maybe my 1 coffee a day. No, I think being open-minded and being very adaptable. I would invest in anyone who is adaptable, because if you're adaptable, you can learn quickly, and you can move, and you can change your thinking. If you're stuck in your way, it makes it very difficult. You're not open to new ideas, new opportunities, and you don't see you only see things from a certain way.
What do you consider success to be as an entrepreneur? Because success is relative, right? Everybody's kind of got their own idea. So for you, what is success?
That's a really hard question, because as an entrepreneur, you're constantly changing the goalpost, and you say, oh, I want to get to this much revenue this month, and you get there and actually it just looks like another number on a piece of paper.
Right.
So I think that's really hard. When I was younger, my dream was to be able to travel the world and be anywhere I wanted to be. And for the first time about 3 weeks ago now, I went to Asia, and I had my laptop, and I was sitting by the pool in Bali, and I was like, this is amazing. This is officially amazing. Like, this day, that was success in a small way, like just this milestone this year. That's success to me, because I wanted to be able to work anywhere. And here I was sitting by a pool. No one could tell me what to do. And there were still payments coming in from customers. So I think that's pretty amazing. I think that's a really hard question. It will constantly change. I mean, I know people who are very successful in Silicon Valley, and they're very successful. Maybe in their eyes, they're still at the bottom of the top. And so I think that's very hard to answer. At the moment, my next goal is to be an investor. So maybe I'll be successful when I'm an investor. But then you want to say, well, I want to have, 3 multi-billion-dollar exits. Yep. That's success. Like, who knows? So I think it's just really important to along the way, that's actually advice I give myself. Celebrate successes along the way. You totally forget. As I said, you hit a revenue milestone and you're like, oh, I'm going to buy this present for myself. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to stick to what you say you're going to do in terms of celebrating those successes along the way.
Oh, yeah, you're preaching to the choir. We just, I made a sale last week, and for like 3 months I was saying, when I make this particular sale, I'm going to buy myself an Apple Watch, and I haven't done it yet, so.
Oh, do it. Just won't even notice, like, you won't even notice the money out of the bank. You'll just, like, prepare yourself to, like, make another sale.
Yep, absolutely, yeah. So good. Next question here. What is a quality that you have, Holly, that you would consider essential to being an entrepreneur?
Passion for what you're doing. Everybody says, oh, you need to be passionate, and you don't really understand. But then when things are terrible, you understand that you won't give up because you really are passionate about what you're doing, and you wouldn't be doing anything else.
What's a book that you would recommend to us, and why?
I'm currently reading, so I'm only halfway through, is Hard Things About Hard Things.
Say that one more time.
The Hard Things About Hard Things.
Okay, who's that by?
Ben Horowitz, so a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, one of the largest venture firms in the Valley. And, I mean, it's only the beginning, but he talks about how he took a company pretty much to a public company. It went from like, $14 a share down to $5 a share, down to 35 cents a share, pretty much bankrupt, and then back up to, some crazy amount and exited multiple times. He's an investor in, you name it, but Airbnb is definitely one of theirs. And so he goes through learning lessons about like the hard things about running a company. So hard things about like firing a friend if a friend's on the team, demoting someone, making difficult decisions, going to your board with like terrible news. All these things happen, but nobody really talks about them. At the end of the day, everybody is your friend and everybody wants to hear about when you're doing well. Nobody wants to help you when you're not doing well. So I think it's really like, it does have some good learnings in it. Some